One of the other challenges was the abuse that she had suffered at the hands of your father as well. Also, something that you really go into more detail on in the book. So you and your mother, your older sister, you eventually ended up in a shelter. I believe you were 7 years old at the time. What do you remember about that?
I remember a lot. I remember a lot. And what's so striking about auberge, and auberge is French. I learned that through my research for shelter. And so that was the name of the place. Currently, though, the name of that place, the women's shelter, is the Denise House. And that's because it is named after a woman who unfortunately was killed by the hands of her partner. And through my research in the book, I learned that Denise was at the women's shelter at the same time as me and my mother and my sister. And my mom was pregnant at the time. So when you ask me what I remember, I don't remember Denise, and I don't remember, the faces and the names of a lot of the women there. But what I remember is loving this place, loving it because, there's all this food in the fridge. That's awesome. That's new for me. There's endless toys and crayons to play for. And, my mom was laughing and smiling and just happy. And I didn't understand that this was a place that we shouldn't have to be at. We were fleeing, my dad's house and his abuse. And, but I do remember it being a place where I saw my mother flourish and I felt happy to be, but not truly understanding until, years later, of course, understanding that, wow, these are safe havens that women in our communities will need and do need. And as much as we wish and we hope that we'll never have to have them, chances are we will, unfortunately.
Yeah, I remember watching one interview that you and your mother actually had done together. I believe it was with CBC, and for both of you, it just quite emotional talking about this moment and this time you spent in the shelter and how life-changing it became, because it really did eventually lead to this big turning point, which you identified as this moment when your mom finds out that your family has a place in co-op housing in Pickering, and you say that this really changed everything for you.
Yeah, that was my turning point. And of course I was, maybe 8 at the time. And so you don't think of it in those terms, right? Like, this is going to change our life. But it did, because what happened is, so my mother gets a phone call that she has a co-op house in Pickering, Ontario, unit number 8, shout out, 1355 Finch, I'll never forget. And, she takes the place. Taking the place means she has to leave my dad. And he doesn't like that. He's not happy about that. And he makes it hard for her. Like, we leave with not a lot of things in our possession. But the reason that was a turning point for us because for the first time, my mother had been in this country over a decade. And this is the first time that my mom had her own place. And my mother having her own place over her head, Priya, means she now had autonomy over her life. When she, what she could do, the decisions that she could be made, how she wanted to live as a mother and as a woman, that was in her control now. And what happens when a woman thrives, what happens when a mother thrives, is her children start to thrive and they start to bloom. And that's what happened. And, then I discovered sport. Then my mother was able to get work that she truly enjoyed. She became a healthcare aide. They call it personal support workers now, PSWs. But she loved taking care of elderly people and nurturing them. And she loved that. And I really, looking back now, was like, that's when my mother was no longer under the oppressive thumb of my father. My father would, when we lived with him, he would turn off the electricity in the house. So we were in pitch blackness. My father would, as a way to control my mother, he would come in and just turn off the taps, turn off the water. So we had no drinking water, while we were home, and he'd just leave, right? He'd leave and go to work. And that's what my mother was used to. That's what we were used to. But for the first time, my mother got to call the shots. And when she got to call the shots and have control over her life, that is truly when things turned for us as a family.